She was about to be thrown in a broken well for being Native's wife, until he pulled her back alive. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. The wind howled through the sparse trees as the sun began to dip beneath the horizon. The cold of the evening settled quickly over the town of Ravenwood, a dusty, isolated settlement at the edge of the desert. Tensions had been rising for days, and that evening, they reached their breaking point. Amelia stood at the edge of the town square, surrounded by a small crowd of hostile faces. The jeers and muttered insults made her heart race, her palms clammy despite the chill in the air. She had been living in Ravenwood for over a year, ever since her husband, a Cherokee warrior named Tay, had died in a skirmish with settlers. Though her marriage was based on love, the town had never accepted her as one of their own. Now, her fate seemed sealed. The townspeople had decided that, because she had married a native man, she was no longer welcome. Her crime? Loving the man who had been her everything. Her crime? Being Native's wife. The town's sheriff, a burly man named Tom Richards, had made it clear. She would pay for the shame she brought upon Ravenwood. As the crowd gathered, Amelia's body trembled, not from fear of death itself, but from the overwhelming sense of injustice. She had done nothing wrong. Her only crime was her love for a man who had treated her with kindness and respect. Tom's voice cut through the air, sharp and final. We have no room for your kind here. It's time to make sure this mistake doesn't happen again. A group of men grabbed her roughly by the arms, dragging her toward the well at the edge of town. The well, long abandoned and half-collapsed, had become a symbol of her punishment. She had been cast out, shunned, and now she was about to be thrown into a forgotten pit, left to die, for the sin of loving a man who wasn't from their world. As she struggled against the men's grip, her mind flashed to Tay. She could almost hear his voice in her head, calm and reassuring. No matter what happens, I will always love you, he had said on his deathbed. A tear slipped down her cheek. She hadn't been able to protect him, and now she was about to die alone. Just as they were about to throw her into the dark pit, a voice rang out. Stop! It was a command, one that stopped the men in their tracks. Amelia turned her head to see a figure emerging from the shadows, tall and regal, moving with the grace of someone accustomed to battle. It was a man, but not just any man. He was dressed in the traditional garb of the Lakota tribe, his face painted with the symbols of his people. Amelia's breath caught in her throat as she recognized him. Kikoa, the war chief of the Lakota, known for his strength and bravery. He had been a distant ally to her late husband, and now, he was here, standing between her and certain death. Without a word, Kikoa moved swiftly, pulling Amelia away from the crowd, his strong hands lifting her as if she weighed nothing. You will not harm her, he said, his voice cold but full of authority. The crowd parted, silent and confused, as Kikoa moved Amelia to safety. The sheriff stood frozen, unwilling to challenge the mighty warrior who had saved her life. Amelia's heart pounded in her chest, not just from the adrenaline, but from the realization that she had been saved. She looked up at Kikoa, her savior, as he gazed down at her with intense, dark eyes. You are safe now, he said softly, his voice surprisingly gentle. No one will hurt you again. Amelia could hardly believe what had just happened. She had been moments away from death, yet now she was in the arms of a man who had come to her rescue without hesitation. The crowd, stunned into silence, could do nothing but watch as Kikoa led her away. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in what felt like forever, Amelia felt hope flicker in her heart. She had been given a second chance at life, and she would not waste it. The next morning, Amelia awoke in a small, dimly lit cabin. The rough wooden walls creaked as the wind outside picked up, the familiar sound of the prairie's harsh climate sweeping through the cracks. She felt a warmth in the air that made her feel safe, but her body still trembled from the shock of the previous night. Her heart raced as memories flooded her mind. The well, the cruel crowd, and then Kikoa. She slowly sat up, her body sore from being manhandled by the men the night before. As her eyes adjusted to the soft light, she saw Kikoa standing by the window, his broad shoulders casting a shadow against the morning sun. He turned when he heard her stir, his dark eyes meeting hers with a mixture of concern and determination. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice calm, yet full of authority. Amelia swallowed hard, still unsure whether the events of last night were a dream. I don't know. I don't understand. Why did you help me?" Kikoa stepped closer, kneeling beside the small bed. "You're not the only one who has suffered at the hands of those who do not understand. I came for you because your husband, Tay, was my brother in spirit. I owe him a debt." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. She had heard of Kikoa, the war chief, and his reputation. But the idea that he would feel such loyalty to Tay, someone so different from his own people, left her speechless. "I never imagined this," she whispered. Kikoa looked at her with sympathy. "Sometimes, the path we walk is not the one we expect. But now, you are safe. You belong here, with my people if you wish." Amelia was quiet for a long time, her mind spinning. She had been cast out, betrayed by the town she had tried to make a home in, but now she was being offered something entirely new: safety, protection, and a place where she could belong. But at what cost? "What do you mean, with your people?" she asked cautiously. Kikoa's eyes softened, and he explained, "You've been saved from that well, but you must understand that you are more than just a rescued woman now. You are part of something bigger. You are not just a survivor. You are part of the Lakota." Amelia's chest tightened at the thought. She had always known Tay's tribe had their own ways, their own rules, but to become part of it was a different matter altogether. "I don't know if I belong," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "You are stronger than you think. This is a chance for a new life, but the choice is yours. You can stay and become one of us, or you can go." The weight of his words sank deep into her heart. There was no turning back from this decision. "I need time," she said finally, her voice trembling. "Of course," Kikoa replied. "Take all the time you need. My people understand the weight of such a choice." As the day wore on, Amelia spent hours walking through the camp that Kikoa had brought her to. The Lakota people moved with a quiet strength, each person busy with their daily tasks. Some of the women greeted her with wary curiosity, while the men gave her respectful nods. She felt out of place, like an outsider in a world she knew nothing about. As she walked, she noticed the children playing by the fire, their laughter echoing in the crisp morning air. They seemed so free, so unburdened by the heavy past that Amelia carried with her. One of the women approached her, a tall woman with long, dark hair braided down her back. She smiled gently, though there was a sadness in her eyes that Amelia couldn't quite understand. "You are welcome here," the woman said, her voice warm. "If you choose to stay, you will be treated as one of our own." Amelia nodded, unsure of what to say. She wanted to feel the sense of belonging that the woman spoke of, but she still wasn't sure if she could shake off the isolation that had followed her for so long. Later that evening, Kikoa invited her to sit by the fire. The flames flickered in the dark, casting shadows on his face as he looked into her eyes. "I don't know what your decision will be," he said, "but know this: my people value honor, loyalty, and strength. You have proven all of those things already. You are a warrior in your own right." Amelia's heart swelled with emotion. She had never thought of herself as a warrior, but in that moment, she realized that perhaps she was. She had survived so much: loss, betrayal, and fear, and now, she had the chance to rebuild her life, to fight for something worth protecting. "I don't know if I can live up to that," she replied, her voice barely audible over the crackling of the fire. Kikoa's expression softened, his gaze steady and unwavering. "You already have." The words hung in the air, and for the first time since her husband's death, Amelia felt something stir inside her, something that could become hope. She didn't know where this new path would lead, but she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't alone anymore. And that, for now, was enough. The days that followed were a whirlwind of new experiences for Amelia. Every step she took in the Lakota camp felt like a step further away from the life she had once known. The warmth of the fire, the sound of drums echoing through the night, the smell of roasting meat. All of it was so different from the small, judgmental town she had left behind. She had been embraced by the tribe, but now she had to decide whether to fully accept this new life or continue carrying the weight of her past. Kikoa had made it clear that she was welcome, but there was more to it than just being accepted. She had to earn her place among them, prove that she could live up to the strength and honor of the Lakota people. Each day, Amelia found herself learning something new. She practiced the skills of survival, tracking, hunting, and riding. But more importantly, she learned the customs and traditions that bound the tribe together. She was not just a guest. She was beginning to see that she could become one of them, part of a community where every individual played a vital role. But as the days turned into weeks, Amelia struggled with the weight of her decision. She had made it this far, but could she truly leave behind everything she had known? One evening, as she sat by the fire, a group of women came to her with baskets of dried herbs. They spoke to her softly, welcoming her into their fold. They shared their stories of hardship and survival, of the strength they had gained through their struggles. Amelia listened, feeling both humbled and empowered. They did not judge her for her past, nor did they expect her to forget it. They simply wanted her to be part of their world now, to share in the bond they all shared as women of the tribe. As she listened, she realized something that made her heart swell with emotion. She was no longer just a widow. She was no longer the woman who had been cast aside by the townspeople. She was becoming a warrior in her own right, not with weapons, but with the strength of her spirit and the love she had to give. The days passed, and Amelia grew stronger. Kikoa continued to watch over her, his presence a constant reassurance. He had shown her what it meant to be part of something greater, and now, she was starting to understand. She had come to the Lakota as an outsider, but she was beginning to feel the pull of belonging, the promise of family. One evening, as the sun set over the rolling hills, Kikoa invited her to join him on a ride. They rode side by side through the vast plains, the wind tugging at their clothes as the sun dipped low in the sky. "Amelia," Kikoa said, his voice steady and calm, "I know you are still unsure, but I see the strength in you. You belong here with us." Amelia's heart fluttered as she looked at him. His words, so simple yet so profound, had the power to heal the wounds she had carried for so long. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted, her voice full of uncertainty. "But every day, I feel like I am. I just don't want to lose myself in this." Kikoa smiled, his eyes softening. "You won't lose yourself. You will become more of who you are meant to be. In time, you will see." The ride was quiet after that, each of them lost in their thoughts, but Amelia felt a sense of peace settle over her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time since Tay's death, she felt hopeful. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, growing, and becoming someone stronger than she had ever imagined. The next morning, as she walked through the camp, she felt a new sense of purpose. She had made her decision. She would stay. She would learn, adapt, and become part of this new family that had taken her in. The Lakota had shown her what it meant to fight for what you love, to stand by those who need you, and to protect what is yours. And now, Amelia was ready to fight for them too. She was no longer just the widow, the outsider, the woman cast aside. She was part of something much larger now, and she would stand with her people, whatever came next. The following weeks were a blur of learning, adjustment, and deepening connections for Amelia. As she spent more time with the Lakota, the once insurmountable divide between her past and her new life began to shrink. She no longer felt like a stranger, but someone who was starting to carve out a place in a world that had seemed so foreign just a short time ago. The women of the tribe taught her how to prepare meals over the fire, how to tan hides, and how to weave the intricate patterns of the Lakota's traditional garments. These were skills she never imagined herself mastering. But with each passing day, she grew more confident. Kikoa had been right. She was becoming part of something greater. One afternoon, as she sat near the fire, working with a group of women, she overheard a conversation that made her pause. "The scouts have returned," one of the women said. "There is talk of a threat moving through the land." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. She knew that the tribe had been facing increasing pressure from settlers and other outsiders, but the thought of a direct confrontation made her stomach churn. Kikoa had made it clear that the Lakota were not ones to back down from a fight, but Amelia wasn't sure she was ready for what might come. As the day went on, the camp buzzed with activity. Kikoa and the other warriors gathered around a large fire, discussing the reports from the scouts. Amelia could feel the tension in the air as she watched them strategize. The warriors, with their stoic expressions and calm demeanor, were preparing for what they knew could be a dangerous battle. When the meeting broke up, Kikoa approached her, his expression unreadable. "Amelia," he said, his voice low, "it is time." Amelia's pulse quickened. "Time for what?" she asked, though deep down, she already knew the answer. "The tribe is preparing for conflict. You have chosen to stay with us, and now, you will stand with us." His words were firm, but there was a softness in his eyes that reassured her. She had proven herself over the past weeks, and now, it was her time to prove that she belonged. "But I don't know how to fight," she replied, her voice faltering. Kikoa's gaze softened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have already fought," he said. "You have fought for your life, for your place in this world. Now, you will fight for your family, for us." Amelia felt a surge of determination flood through her. She had been given a second chance, and she wouldn't let fear stop her now. That night, she stood beside Kikoa as the warriors prepared for battle. She wasn't armed like the others, but she had learned the ways of the tribe, the importance of unity, of standing together in the face of adversity. The sound of drums filled the air, a rhythmic call to arms that resonated deep within her chest. As the warriors mounted their horses, Amelia stood tall, her heart racing. She wasn't a warrior, but she was ready to fight for those who had given her a home when she had none. The battle was swift, a blur of movement and chaos as the Lakota warriors clashed with the settlers and their armed men. Amelia's role was not in the fighting, but in the support. She helped care for the wounded, offering water, salves, and comfort where she could. Her heart ached as she saw the carnage around her, but she remained steady, focused on the task at hand. When the battle was over, the dust settled, and the quiet that followed was almost more suffocating than the clash of steel. Kikoa rode to her side, his face bloodied but determined. "We have one," he said, his voice hoarse but strong. Amelia nodded, though her mind was clouded with the aftermath of the violence. "What now?" she asked softly. Kikoa looked out over the battlefield, where the warriors were tending to the wounded and gathering the fallen. "Now we rebuild. Now, we remember that we are a family, and we protect what is ours." In the days that followed, the Lakota camp was alive with the sound of healing and rebuilding. The warriors tended to their horses, the women continued their work, and the children played with a renewed sense of safety. But for Amelia, things had changed. She had been tested in ways she never expected, and now, more than ever, she knew she had found her place. She was not just a widow or a woman rescued from the brink of death. She was part of something much bigger, a part of a family that would fight and die for one another. And that, she realized, was all she had ever wanted. As she sat by the fire that evening, surrounded by the people who had become her family, she felt a peace she had never known before. The future was uncertain, but for the first time since Tay's death, Amelia felt like she had a purpose, like she was no longer drifting, but standing firm. She had fought for her place, and now, she would fight to keep it. The days following the battle were filled with quiet reflection and unspoken changes. Amelia had stood by Kikoa's side during the fight, not as a warrior, but as a part of the tribe, ready to offer whatever help she could. The victory, though hard won, had brought a sense of solidarity to the Lakota camp. Yet, for Amelia, there was still an unspoken question hanging in the air. Was she truly ready to embrace this new life fully? She had learned much, endured much, and proven herself. But could she leave her old self behind completely? As the sun set one evening, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Amelia found herself once again sitting by the fire, a quiet place she had come to cherish. She had spent the day working alongside the women, mending clothes, gathering firewood, and learning the songs of the Lakota. These songs, full of history and pride, resonated deeply within her, and she began to feel a growing connection to the tribe's spirit. Kikoa joined her by the fire, his presence as steady as ever. "You've been quiet today," he said, his voice carrying a hint of curiosity. Amelia looked up at him, the flickering flames casting shadows across his face. "I'm just thinking," she replied softly. "Thinking about everything that's happened, about what I'm becoming." Kikoa nodded, understanding. He had seen her transformation over the past few weeks, how she had gone from a woman broken by loss to one who now stood strong, capable, and full of purpose. "The road ahead will not always be easy," he said, his voice low. But you are not alone in it. Amelia smiled, feeling the weight of his words settle in her heart. She had learned to trust him, to see in him not just a leader, but a protector, a man who truly cared for her well-being. But it wasn't just Kikoa's presence that had anchored her in this new life. It was the people of the tribe, who had welcomed her with open arms, who had shown her that strength could come from community, not just from within. The next day, Amelia woke early, as was the custom in the camp. She joined the women as they prepared for the day's tasks. As they worked, the women shared stories, some lighthearted, some filled with the pain of their pasts. Amelia felt her heart swelling with emotion as she listened. She had learned that they, too, had endured loss, that they, too, had struggled. And yet, they had all found a way to survive, to thrive, together. After the work was done, Kikoa came to her once again, his expression serious. There is a task for you, he said. The tribe needs you. Amelia's pulse quickened. What is it? She asked, already knowing that it would be something important, something that would test her. We are gathering supplies for the coming winter, Kikoa explained. There are scouts who have seen tracks in the mountains. We need to ensure that our path is safe. Amelia's mind raced. She had never ventured into the mountains before, but she knew this was a task she could not turn down. This was her chance to prove herself, not just to Kikoa, but to the tribe as a whole. I'm ready, she said, her voice firm. Kikoa studied her for a moment, a slight smile tugging at his lips. You have come a long way, he said. I knew from the moment I saw you that you would be a warrior in your own way. Amelia stood up, feeling a new sense of purpose fill her. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when she would truly begin to earn her place among the Lakota. As they set out for the mountains, Amelia could feel the weight of her decision pressing upon her. This was no longer just about survival. It was about belonging. It was about proving that she could stand with the Lakota, not just as an outsider, but as one of their own. The journey through the mountains was treacherous, the path winding and steep, but Amelia moved with determination, her every step a testament to her newfound strength. She had come so far, and she wasn't about to turn back now. After several days of travel, they reached the high ground where the scouts had reported seeing tracks. The air was thin, and the cold bit at their skin, but Amelia was undeterred. She knew what she had to do. As they surveyed the area, Kikoa turned to her. We are here to protect our people, he said. This is your moment, Amelia. Amelia nodded, taking a deep breath. She was no longer the woman who had been cast aside by the world. She was no longer the widow mourning her husband. She was a part of something much bigger. With one final glance at Kikoa, she stepped forward, her eyes scanning the terrain, her heart filled with the strength of the Lakota people. She was ready to face whatever came next. The wind howled across the mountain pass as Amelia, Kikoa, and the rest of the warriors continued their journey through the high terrain. The cold was biting, the kind that seeped through layers of clothing, but Amelia barely noticed. The sharp air and the rugged landscape felt like a reminder of what was at stake. She wasn't just walking beside the warriors anymore. She was one of them, part of the Lakota. She had earned her place. The mountains were harsh, unforgiving. The path was treacherous, with cliffs that seemed to drop away without warning and rocks that made every step a challenge. Amelia's breath came in sharp gasps as she climbed, but she pushed on, refusing to fall behind. The group's leader, Kikoa, led the way, his figure a solid silhouette against the pale sky. His movements were precise, confident, a man who knew the land like the back of his hand. Amelia kept her gaze on him, taking comfort in his presence. He had always been the steady force at her side, but now, she was beginning to feel like she was the one holding her own ground. The higher they climbed, the thinner the air became, and Amelia could feel the weight of her decision growing heavier. This was her test, not just of strength, but of character. Could she keep up with the Lakota warriors in more than just physical endurance? Could she truly become one of them in spirit as well? They finally reached the crest of the mountain pass, where the scouts had reported seeing the tracks of a potential threat. The landscape before them opened up, revealing a vast expanse of rocky terrain and sparse vegetation. From this high point, they could see for miles, and Amelia knew that what lay ahead could change everything. Kikoa signaled for the group to stop. His sharp eyes scanned the landscape as he knelt beside the ground, examining the tracks left behind by the enemy. Amelia joined him, her senses alert, as she took in the trail of footprints that wound through the rocky ground. "They've been here recently," Kikoa said, his voice low and steady. "They know the land as well as we do. We must be careful." Amelia nodded, her heart racing as she took in the gravity of the situation. She had always known the Lakota had enemies, but the reality of it was different. These were people who posed a direct threat to everything she had come to care about. Kikoa turned to her, his expression unreadable. "You're ready for this," he said simply. Amelia swallowed hard. "I don't know if I am," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Kikoa's eyes softened. "You are. You've been tested, not just in battle, but in your spirit. You have already proven yourself." His words, though simple, carried a weight that Amelia couldn't ignore. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for a family, for a people who had accepted her and taught her what it meant to belong. As the group descended the mountain, Amelia felt the burden of leadership fall heavier on Kikoa's shoulders. He had to make decisions quickly, and the responsibility of those decisions weighed on him. But Amelia noticed something she hadn't before. Even in the face of danger, Kikoa remained calm. He wasn't just leading the tribe, he was guiding them, teaching them, and in turn, he was teaching her. They finally reached a narrow canyon, the perfect place for an ambush. Kikoa signaled for everyone to stop and huddle close. The tension in the air was palpable as they gathered, each warrior preparing for the confrontation. Amelia's heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to show fear. She had seen the battle plans. She knew what was expected of her. Kikoa glanced at her, his gaze firm but understanding. "Stay close. Watch for signs," he instructed. Amelia nodded, gripping her weapon tightly. She had learned how to use it, but she had never truly tested herself in battle until now. The wind began to pick up, carrying with it the scent of the enemy. Amelia's eyes darted from one side of the canyon to the other, her senses sharpened. Every sound, every movement, could be the enemy preparing to strike. The silence stretched out, the weight of it almost unbearable. Then, out of nowhere, the first arrow flew, cutting through the air with deadly precision. Amelia reacted instinctively, diving to the side and drawing her bow in one smooth motion. She fired back, the tension in her muscles allowing her shot to fly true. The battle erupted in chaos around her. Arrows whizzed past, and the sound of battle cries filled the air. The warriors fought with an intensity that came from years of training, their movements swift and coordinated. Amelia, though not as experienced, fought with everything she had learned. Her heart raced as she dodged an incoming strike and countered with a well-placed strike of her own. It was no longer just about survival. It was about protecting the people she had come to love. The battle raged on, but as the last of the enemy was driven away, Amelia found herself standing amidst the smoke and dust, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. Kikoa approached, his face bloodied but unbroken. "You did well," he said, his voice filled with pride. Amelia couldn't speak for a moment, her emotions overwhelmed by the intensity of the battle. But in that moment, she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer just a woman who had been saved. She was a warrior, part of the Lakota, and ready to defend her people no matter the cost. The days following the battle were filled with both relief and reflection. The Lakota had emerged victorious, but the cost of the conflict was felt deeply in the hearts of every warrior, woman, and child. Amelia, though not injured physically, felt the weight of the battle in her soul. The faces of those she had fought beside were now etched in her memory, some of them with wounds, some with lost expressions that reflected the sorrow of war. As she walked through the camp, she found herself speaking to the women more, sharing stories, and helping to tend to the wounded. Her role had changed from the outsider to someone integral to the tribe's survival. Yet, there was still a lingering feeling of uncertainty. Amelia had fought hard, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more she had to do to prove herself. Kikoa noticed the shift in her. He watched her, his eyes thoughtful, as she worked beside the other women, carefully cleaning wounds and preparing food. He could see that she was carrying a burden that no one had asked her to bear. That night, as the stars began to fill the sky, Kikoa approached her by the fire. "You've done well, Amelia," he said, his voice steady. "But you are still carrying something inside. What is it?" Amelia looked up at him, her heart heavy. I just feel like I'm not enough yet, she said quietly. I fought, I protected, I did what I had to do. But it doesn't feel like it's enough. Kikoa sat down beside her, his expression softening. You have proven yourself in ways that many would never be able to, he said. The battle, the protection, the spirit, these are all things that cannot be measured by a single moment. Amelia felt his words sink in, but the feeling of doubt still lingered. What should I do now, she asked. Kikoa looked up at the vast sky, the stars reflecting in his eyes. Now, you must find your place in this world, he said. You fought for us. Now fight for yourself. Do not carry the weight of others' expectations, but rather create your own path. His words resonated deeply within her. She had been trying so hard to fit into a mold that she thought was expected of her. But Kikoa was right. She had to find her own way, her own purpose. The following days were filled with more training, but this time, it was not just physical. Amelia began to focus on her inner strength, learning not only the ways of the Lakota, but the lessons of the spirit that had always been present but had been overshadowed by her own doubts. She spent time with the elders, listening to their stories, learning about the traditions that shaped their lives. She began to understand that being part of the Lakota wasn't about fighting battles. It was about living with honor, with respect, and with a deep connection to the land and to each other. One afternoon, as she practiced with her bow, Kikoa approached her again, this time with a more serious expression. The settlers are moving closer, he said. We have received word that they are planning to expand further into our land. We cannot let this happen. Amelia looked at him, her hands still gripping the bow. She had seen the tension in the camp, felt the restlessness in the air. She had feared this day would come. The settlers' encroachment had always been a threat, but now it was more real than ever. What can we do? Amelia asked, her voice steady. Kikoa's gaze was hard, but there was a softness in his eyes as he looked at her. We must defend what is ours, he said. But we do not do it with anger. We do it with the strength of our ancestors. We fight for our land, for our people, but we do not lose ourselves in the process. Amelia nodded, understanding the weight of his words. This was the moment that would define everything she had learned. She was no longer just a woman who had been saved. She was a part of something much larger, and it was her responsibility now to protect it. As the sun set that evening, the camp buzzed with preparation. The warriors sharpened their weapons, the women gathered supplies, and the children were kept close, their laughter a small comfort in the tense atmosphere. Amelia felt a deep sense of resolve settle over her. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the people who had accepted her, for the land that had become her home, and for the future of the Lakota. As the night fell and the camp settled into a wary silence, Kikoa found her once more by the fire. Tomorrow will be a hard day, he said, but I know you are ready. Amelia looked at him, her heart full of gratitude. Thank you, she said quietly, for believing in me. Kikoa nodded. You are one of us now, he said, and we stand together as family. As the fire crackled in the still night air, Amelia felt the weight of her decision, but also the strength of the tribe that surrounded her. She had found her place. She was no longer the outsider. She was Lakota, and tomorrow, she would fight for that identity, for her people, for her family, and for the future. The morning of the confrontation dawned with an eerie stillness that filled the air with an undeniable tension. The warriors were gathered, preparing their weapons in silence, their faces etched with resolve. Amelia stood at the edge of the camp, her heart beating in time with the drums that echoed across the plains. She had been given her role in the battle, not as a warrior in the traditional sense, but as a protector of the tribe's sacred grounds, ensuring the safety of those who could not fight. The responsibility weighed heavily on her, but it also filled her with purpose. Kikoa approached her, his movements deliberate as he carried his bow, the symbol of his leadership. Today is the day we protect what is ours, he said, his voice steady but filled with the gravity of the situation. You are ready, Amelia. Today, we fight as one. Amelia nodded, her gaze steady. She had learned the ways of the Lakota, how to fight, how to stand strong, how to protect what mattered most. But it was not just the skills of combat she had mastered. It was the strength of spirit that came from understanding her place within the tribe. She wasn't an outsider anymore. She was a daughter of the Lakota, and she would fight for them as they had fought for her. As the group set out for the battlefield, The air seemed to grow thicker, the weight of the approaching conflict settling into their bones. Amelia kept her eyes forward, scanning the horizon for any signs of movement. The landscape was vast and open, but the land they were about to defend held sacred meaning. It was not just about the physical ground. It was about their way of life, their history, and their future. The group moved quickly but quietly, each warrior alert and focused on the task ahead. The further they traveled, the more the tension built in Amelia's chest. She was not just preparing to protect. She was preparing to defend the life she had now, the life she had fought to build. When they reached the edge of the valley where the settlers were positioned, Kikoa motioned for everyone to halt. He signaled for the group to form a defensive line, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. "We will not attack unless provoked," he said firmly, his voice carrying authority. "But if they step foot on our land, we will defend it with our lives." Amelia could feel the weight of his words. This was not just about protecting land. This was about protecting the heart of their people, their identity. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the valley as the first signs of movement appeared on the horizon. The settlers were approaching, their wagons and armed men visible in the distance. The tension was palpable as the warriors drew their weapons, their eyes focused on the coming threat. Amelia took her place alongside the others, her heart racing but her hands steady. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew one thing. She would stand with the Lakota, no matter the cost. As the settlers drew closer, Amelia noticed that many of them seemed hesitant, unsure. It was clear that they were unfamiliar with the land, unsure of what awaited them. The Lakota warriors were skilled in the ways of the land, knowing its secrets, its paths, its dangers. The settlers were outsiders, unfamiliar with the terrain and its history. Amelia knew that the Lakota would have the advantage. As the two groups came within speaking distance, Kikoa stepped forward, his voice clear and commanding. "This land is sacred to the Lakota. You have been warned before. Leave, or you will face the consequences." The leader of the settlers, a man with a weathered face and a rough demeanor, stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "We've come to claim what's ours," he said, his voice laced with arrogance. "This land belongs to the settlers now." Amelia's blood boiled at his words, but she kept her calm. She had learned the importance of patience from the Lakota. Violence would only come if there was no other choice. Kikoa did not flinch. "This land does not belong to you," he said, his voice unwavering. "You are trespassing on sacred ground. Leave now, and we will spare you." The settler leader scoffed, his hand tightening around his sword. "You think you can stop us? We are many, and you are few." With a swift motion, Kikoa signaled the warriors to ready themselves. The battle, though inevitable, had not yet begun. "We fight to protect what is ours," he said softly, looking at Amelia, who stood beside him. Amelia nodded, her eyes locked on the settlers. She was ready. As the first arrow was fired, the air shattered with the sound of battle. The warriors moved with precision, their strikes swift and deadly. Amelia fought alongside them, not with a weapon, but with her heart. She had learned to fight not just for herself, but for the future of the Lakota, for the people who had welcomed her when she had nothing. The battle was fierce, but it was over quickly. The settlers, unable to withstand the strength and unity of the Lakota, retreated, leaving behind only the echoes of their retreating footsteps. The land was safe once again, and the Lakota had defended their home. As the warriors stood in silence, catching their breath, Kikoa turned to Amelia. "You did well," he said, his eyes filled with respect. Amelia smiled, though the weight of the battle still lingered in her chest. She had fought not just for survival, but for the future of her people, and she had proven that she was truly one of them. The sun was setting on the Lakota camp, casting long shadows across the faces of those who had fought so fiercely to protect their land. The aftermath of the battle hung heavily in the air, but there was a sense of quiet pride in the warriors who had stood their ground. Amelia, though weary from the fight, stood tall among them, her heart full of both sorrow and strength. She had seen the price of victory, the blood spilled for the land that was so sacred to the Lakota, and she knew that the battle was far from over. The settlers, though beaten back, would not stop trying to take what was not theirs. They would return, and when they did, the Lakota would have to be ready. Amelia's thoughts turned to the future. She had proven herself in battle, but now it was time to prove herself as a leader in her own right. The Lakota had accepted her as one of their own, but she had not yet earned the full respect of all the tribe. The elders had their doubts. The women still watched her closely, and the children, though they admired her, saw her as something of a mystery. Kikoa had told her that her journey was just beginning, and the weight of those words pressed down on her as she stood by the fire, looking out over the vast landscape. She had fought for them, but now she had to ensure that the tribe's future was secure. As she turned to walk back to the camp, Kikoa approached her, his expression thoughtful. "You did well," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But this is only one battle. The war for our land is far from over." Amelia nodded, the weight of his words settling deep within her. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty that churned inside her. Kikoa looked out at the horizon, his eyes narrowing. "We prepare," he said simply. "We fortify our position, gather our allies, and stand strong. This is not just about fighting settlers. This is about defending our way of life." Amelia listened carefully, taking in his words. She had always known that the Lakota's fight wasn't just about land. It was about their culture, their identity, and their future. She understood now that her role in this fight was much greater than she had imagined. "I want to help," she said, her voice filled with resolve. Kikoa turned to her, his eyes meeting hers. "You have already helped," he said, a rare softness in his tone. "But there is more you must do. You will not just fight with a bow or a blade. You will fight with wisdom, with heart, and with unity." The responsibility of his words hung over her like a heavy cloak, but she didn't flinch. She had come this far, and she would not back down now. "I will stand with you," she said, her voice unwavering. "Whatever comes next, I will stand with the Lakota." The night settled in around them, the stars above glowing bright in the crisp sky. As the fire crackled, the camp settled into a quiet rhythm, the warriors preparing for what was to come. Amelia walked among them, her mind focused, her spirit strong. She knew that the fight was not over, but she also knew that together they could face anything. The tribe had embraced her, and now it was her turn to embrace them in return. She would not just be a part of the tribe. She would be a force for change, a symbol of resilience, and a leader in her own right. As the days passed, Amelia threw herself into the work of the camp. She continued her training, honing her skills, and learning the ways of the Lakota. But more than that, she began to take on a greater role in the tribe. She worked closely with the elders, learning their wisdom and helping to shape the future of the Lakota people. She spoke to the women, learning from them as they shared their knowledge of the land, the plants, and the traditions that had been passed down through the generations. She spent time with the children, teaching them what she had learned, and listening to their hopes and dreams for the future. Slowly but surely, Amelia began to earn the respect of those around her. The women of the tribe no longer saw her as an outsider, but as one of their own. The warriors recognized her strength and determination, and the children began to look up to her as a role model. She had proven herself in battle, but now she was proving herself as a leader. And as the days turned into weeks, Amelia knew that she had found her true purpose. The future of the Lakota was uncertain, but she was ready to fight for it, to protect it, and to lead her people into whatever challenges lay ahead. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a warrior, a protector, and a leader. The fight for the land, for the Lakota way of life, was far from over, but Amelia knew that together, they would stand strong, united by their shared history, their unbreakable spirit, and their unwavering love for the land. As the weeks passed, the Lakota camp settled into a rhythm of preparation and resilience. The warriors continued their training. The women focused on gathering and preserving supplies for the coming months, and the children played with the same laughter that had once echoed through the valley. Amelia, having proven herself in battle, now took on a new role in the tribe. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a teacher, a leader, and a voice among the people. The elders had come to trust her, and Kikoa's faith in her had only grown. She spent her days working closely with the tribe's leaders, learning their strategies for protecting the land and ensuring the survival of their people. She spoke with the women, learning from their wisdom and offering her knowledge of the outside world, the world that had once been hers. But as much as she had become a part of the Lakota, she still felt the weight of the looming threat. The settlers, though beaten back once, were not gone. The whispers of their return lingered in the air like the scent of smoke. Amelia had seen the worry in the faces of the elders, heard the conversations that hinted at a new conflict on the horizon. The land that they had fought for was still in danger. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the air grew colder, Kikoa found Amelia sitting by the fire, lost in thought. He had been watching her, noticing the weariness that had crept into her expression. He sat down beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. "You have been carrying the weight of the tribe for weeks now," he said, his voice calm. "But you must not forget that you are still learning. You do not have to bear this alone." Amelia turned to him, her eyes filled with determination. "I know the land is still in danger. The settlers will come again. We must be ready." Kikoa nodded, his gaze firm. "We will be ready. But it is not just about fighting. It is about survival. And survival is not just in battle. It is in the choices we make now." He paused, his eyes locking with hers. "The path forward will not be easy, but it is the path we must walk together. And you, Amelia, are a vital part of that journey." Amelia listened to his words, her heart swelling with pride. She had never felt more connected to this land, to these people. She had found her purpose, and it was to protect and preserve what had been entrusted to her. "I will stand with you, Kikoa," she said softly. "We will protect this land." The next morning, the camp was alive with activity. The warriors gathered to discuss the latest reports from the scouts. The settlers, it seemed, were closer than ever. The time had come for the Lakota to make their move. Amelia stood at the edge of the gathering, her heart racing. She was no longer an outsider, no longer someone who had to prove herself. She had already done that. But now, her role was clear. She would fight, not just for herself, but for the future of the Lakota. As the warriors prepared to leave, Kikoa turned to her. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice steady but with a hint of something deeper, something personal. Amelia nodded, her hand resting on the bough that had become an extension of herself. "I am ready," she said, her voice firm. The journey to the battlefield was long and tense. The landscape seemed to stretch on forever, but Amelia's resolve did not waver. She had fought beside these warriors before, but now, as the battle drew near, she knew that the stakes were higher than ever. This time, it wasn't just about defending their home. It was about preserving their way of life, their culture, and their future. As they approached the settlement where the settlers had made camp, Amelia's heart pounded in her chest. She could see the fires in the distance, the outlines of the settlers' camp lit up by the orange glow of their flames. They were ready. The Lakota warriors dismounted and formed a defensive line, their movements swift and deliberate. Amelia joined them, her bow in hand, her heart steady. She had come a long way, but she was not done yet. This was her moment to stand, not just as a member of the Lakota, but as a leader among them. As the first sounds of the settlers reached their ears, Kikoa turned to face Amelia. "Stay close," he said, his voice low. "Trust in your training." Amelia nodded, her eyes focused on the horizon. She had no fear, only the burning desire to protect. The battle that followed was fierce. Arrows flew, warriors clashed, and the sound of battle echoed through the night. But it was clear from the start that the Lakota were united in their cause. Amelia moved with precision, her bow drawn, her shots landing true. She fought with the strength of a warrior, but also with the wisdom of the Lakota, strategic, focused, and determined. When the dust settled, the settlers had been pushed back once again. The Lakota had defended their land, their home. As the warriors regrouped, Kikoa approached Amelia, his face bloodied but victorious. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with pride. Amelia looked at him, her heart swelling. "We did it," she corrected him, her voice full of emotion. Together, they had fought for the future of the Lakota. And together, they had won. The days following the battle were filled with both reflection and anticipation. The Lakota had once again defended their land, but the victory, though significant, had come at a cost. There were injuries to tend to, the wounded warriors were cared for, and the spirits of the fallen were honored. Amelia, though relieved by the outcome, could not shake the weight of the responsibility that had been placed upon her. She had proven herself on the battlefield, but now, as the dust settled, the true challenge lay ahead. The settlers had been driven back, but they would not be gone for long. Amelia could feel it in the air. Their return was inevitable, and the Lakota would need to be prepared for whatever came next. As she walked through the camp, her eyes scanned the faces of the people she had come to call family. There was a quiet strength in their demeanor, a shared understanding that they would not back down. The land was theirs, and they would fight for it. Kikoa found her by the fire that evening, his face still marked by the dust and blood of the battle. He sat beside her, his gaze thoughtful as he looked out over the camp. "You did well," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of the day's events. Amelia nodded, her hands folding in her lap. "We did well," she corrected him, her voice filled with the truth of it. "We fought together. That is how we win." Kikoa's eyes met hers, his expression softening. "But you have done more than fight," he said. "You have become part of this tribe in ways many never could." Amelia's heart swelled with pride, but there was a part of her that still felt unsettled. She had fought for the Lakota, yes, but she knew that true belonging was more than just defending the land. It was about trust, about living in harmony with the people and the land, and she still had much to learn. "I'm not sure I've earned that," she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "There's still so much I don't know." Kikoa smiled, a rare, gentle expression. "You've earned it by standing with us, by giving everything you have for this land and these people. That is how we measure a person's worth, not by what they know, but by what they are willing to give." His words struck a chord deep within her. She had always believed that her worth was tied to what she could achieve, what she could prove. But now, she understood that it was more about who she was and how she contributed to the collective strength of the tribe. The next few days were filled with preparations. The Lakota gathered what supplies they could, knowing that the settlers would soon make another attempt to claim the land. The scouts were sent out to gather intelligence, and the warriors sharpened their weapons, ready for the fight that was coming. Amelia worked alongside the women, learning more about their ways, about the traditions that had kept the Lakota strong for generations. She spent time with the elders, listening to their stories and learning the spiritual teachings that had guided the tribe through centuries of struggle. With each passing day, she felt herself growing, not just in strength, but in wisdom. She had always been driven by the desire to survive, to protect herself, but now, she was learning to fight for something larger than herself. She was fighting for the future of the Lakota, for their way of life, for their land. One evening, as the fire crackled and the stars filled the sky, Kikoa approached her once again. This time, his expression was more serious, his eyes focused. "The scouts have returned," he said. "The settlers are preparing for their next move. They'll be here soon." Amelia's heart tightened at the news, but she nodded, ready for whatever came next. "What's our plan?" she asked. Kikoa's eyes never wavered. "We stand together," he said firmly. "We fight for what is ours, but we do not fight out of anger. We fight for our people, for our future. This is the moment we show the settlers that they will never take our land. We do it with strength, but also with honor." The weight of his words settled in Amelia's chest. She had fought with anger before, with the raw emotion of a woman who had been wronged. But now, she understood that the true strength of the Lakota came from something deeper than anger. It came from unity, from honor, and from the land itself. The next morning, as the sun rose over the camp, the warriors gathered once again. The women prepared the supplies, the children were kept close, and the elders offered their prayers. Amelia stood with them, her heart steady as she prepared for the battle that would come. The camp was silent, each person focused on the task at hand. They had fought before, but this time, it felt different. This time, it wasn't just about defending their home. It was about defending their way of life, their identity, and their future. As the warriors mounted their horses and rode toward the horizon, Amelia felt a sense of peace settle over her. She was no longer just a woman who had been rescued. She was a warrior, a protector, and a leader. And whatever came next, she would face it with the strength of the Lakota beside her. The sun had barely risen when the first signs of movement from the settlers became clear. From the high ridge, Amelia could see the cloud of dust in the distance, marking the approach of the invaders. The moment had arrived. The warriors had gathered in their usual formation, their faces grim and resolute. There was no need for words. Their unity was their strength. Amelia stood at the edge of the gathering, her heart steady, her bow ready. She had long ago accepted the role she would play in this battle. It was not as a leader on the front lines, but as a protector of the people, the one who ensured that the women, the children, and the elders were safe. Her task was to support, to guide, and to make sure that the tribe remained strong, no matter what the cost. Kikoa was at the forefront, his gaze sharp as he scanned the horizon. He turned to Amelia, his eyes meeting hers with an unspoken understanding. "This is the moment," he said, his voice calm but filled with purpose. "We protect what is ours. For the Lakota. For the future." Amelia nodded, her heart swelling with pride. She had fought alongside the warriors before, but today felt different. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about the future of the Lakota, the future of the land they had fought so long to protect. The air was thick with tension as the warriors prepared. The women and children were sent to the sheltering caves nearby, away from the conflict. The men tightened their grips on their weapons, ready for the inevitable clash. Amelia moved with the precision she had learned from the Lakota, her every step calculated, her mind focused on the task at hand. As the settlers' camp grew closer, the sound of their approach grew louder, their voices carrying through the air. The warriors stood in silence, waiting for the signal from Kikoa. The first arrow was shot, a warning to the invaders, and the battle began. The clash of weapons, the screams of warriors, and the pounding of hooves filled the air. Amelia stood just behind the front lines, watching the chaos unfold. She wasn't a fighter, but she had a role to play. She moved swiftly through the camp, ensuring the safety of the women and children, her every action purposeful. Her heart pounded in her chest as she saw the first casualties, both Lakota and settler. There was no turning back now. The war was here, and it would not be won with hesitation. As the battle raged on, Amelia's thoughts turned to the future. She knew that even if they won this fight, it was only a temporary victory. The settlers would keep coming, driven by greed and a thirst for land. The Lakota would have to stand firm, not just in battle, but in their resolve. They had to preserve their way of life, their culture, their land. And for that, they would fight every day. As the warriors pushed the settlers back, Amelia's role became even clearer. She was not just a survivor of the past. She was the future of the Lakota. The battle may have been fierce, but the strength of the Lakota was unwavering. They fought with the spirit of their ancestors, and with each victory, they grew stronger. When the settlers finally retreated, it was clear that the battle had been won. The Lakota had stood their ground, but the cost was heavy. As the dust settled, the warriors gathered to tend to the wounded. Kikoa stood tall among them, his expression somber but proud. He had led his people with honor, and they had followed him with unwavering loyalty. Amelia joined him, her heart still heavy with the weight of the day. "We've won, but the fight is far from over," she said softly. Kikoa nodded, his gaze focused on the horizon. "This is just one battle. There will be more. But as long as we stand together, we will never fall." Amelia took in his words, knowing that he spoke the truth. The Lakota were not just fighting for land. They were fighting for their future. And as long as they stood together, they would protect that future with everything they had. As the camp settled into a quiet calm, Amelia took a deep breath, her resolve stronger than ever. She was no longer just a part of the Lakota. She was the strength that would carry them forward. Together, they would protect their land, their people, and their way of life. No matter what came next, they would stand as one. The days after the battle were filled with both mourning and a renewed sense of purpose. The Lakota had held their ground once again, but the victory, though hard one, left its mark. The warriors were wounded, some severely, and the loss of life was a bitter reminder of the price they paid for their freedom. Amelia spent those days among the wounded, tending to their needs, her heart heavy as she watched the toll of war. She had fought alongside the Lakota, but now she understood the true cost of defending everything they held dear. Kikoa remained a constant presence at her side. His leadership had guided them through the battle, but even he carried the weight of their losses in his eyes. The two of them often sat in silence, watching the camp settle into a somber routine, the warriors slowly recovering, the women continuing their work to ensure the survival of the tribe. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Kikoa approached Amelia, his steps slow but sure. "You have done more than anyone could have asked," he said, his voice quiet but filled with pride. Amelia looked up at him, the weight of the past few days pressing down on her. "I did what had to be done," she replied, her voice steady but laced with the fatigue of battle. But the cost, it's harder than I thought. Hikoa nodded, his eyes softening as he sat beside her. The cost is always heavy, but it is. A cost we pay for our future, for our people, for the land. Amelia took a deep breath, the weight of his words sinking in. She had joined the Lakota in their fight to protect their way of life, but now she understood that it was more than just a fight. It was a commitment to something larger than herself. She wasn't just defending land. She was defending a future, a culture, and a community that she had come to call home. But what happens now? Amelia asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. The settlers won't stop. We've beaten them back once, but they will come again. Hikoa looked out over the camp, his expression thoughtful. You are right, he said. The fight is never truly over. But now, we have a chance to rebuild, to strengthen our resolve and our unity. He turned to her, his gaze intense. And you, Amelia, will be part of that rebuilding. You are not just a warrior. You are a leader, a protector of this tribe. And that, more than anything, is what we need. Amelia met his gaze, the weight of his words settling over her like a mantle. She had fought for the Lakota, but now she was being asked to lead. It was a daunting responsibility, one that filled her with both pride and fear. But she knew, deep down, that this was where she was meant to be. I'll do whatever it takes, she said, her voice firm with newfound conviction. I'll stand with the Lakota, and I'll fight for their future. The days that followed were a blur of rebuilding and strengthening their defenses. The warriors trained harder, sharpening their skills and preparing for the next threat. The women continued to gather resources, ensuring that the tribe would survive the harsh winter ahead. And Amelia worked alongside them, learning the ways of the Lakota, not just as a warrior, but as a protector of their way of life. But as the weeks turned into months, the tension in the air never fully lifted. The settlers had not returned, but Amelia knew that they would. The land was rich, and the settlers were driven by a hunger for more. The Lakota had defended their home once, but the battle was far from over. The night before the first snowfall, Amelia stood on the edge of the camp, looking out over the land that she had fought to protect. The wind was cold, the air sharp, but there was a quiet beauty in the vast expanse before her. This land had been her home for so long now, and she felt a deep connection to it, a bond that could not be broken. As she stood there, Hikoa joined her, his presence as steady as ever. It is time to face what comes next, he said, his voice soft but filled with purpose. Amelia turned to him, her heart steady. We will face it together, she said, her voice firm with the strength she had found in herself. Together, they would stand against whatever threats came their way. They would defend the Lakota people, their culture, and their land. And they would do it as one, united in their resolve, unyielding in their strength. The battle for their future was not over, but they would fight it with everything they had. And when it was done, they would stand victorious, knowing that they had protected the heart of the Lakota people.